Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing today with Gajendra's Prayers of Surrender. So it's Canto 8, Chapter 3, Text 25. Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis chavrita ye bhayanya Ichami kalena nayasya viplavas Tasyatma lokavaranasya moksham Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis kavritaye bhayanya Ichami kalena nayasya viplavas Tasyatma lokavaranasya moksham Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis chavirtaye bhayanya Ichami kalena nayasya viplavas Tasyatma lokavaranasya moksham Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis chavirtaye bhayanya Ichami kalena moksham Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis chavirtaye bhayanya Ichami kalena nayasya viplavas Tasyatma lokavaranasya moksham Jivishenaham iham muya kim Antar bahis chavirtaye bhayanya Ichami kalena nayasya viplavas Tasyatma lokavaranasya moksham So the word for word, Jivishe, wish to live long. Na, not. Aham, I. Iha, in this life. Amuya, or in the next life. I do not wish to live upon being saved from this dangerous position. Kim, what is the value? Anta, internally. Bahi, externally. Cha, and avirtaya, covered by ignorance. Ipayonya, in this birth as an elephant. Ichami, I desire. Kalena, because of the influence of time. Na, there is not. Yasya, of which. Viplava, annihilation. Yasya, that Atmaloka Avaranalmasya, from the covering of self-realization. Moksham, liberation. So, the translation by Srila Prabhupada. I do not wish to live anymore after I'm released from the attack of the crocodile. What is the use of an elephant's body covered externally and internally by ignorance? I simply desire eternal liberation from the covering of ignorance. That covering is not destroyed by the influence of time. Purport. In this material world, every living entity is covered by the darkness of ignorance. Therefore, the Vedas enjoin that one should approach the Supreme Lord through the spiritual master, who is described and offered prayers in the Gautamiya Tantra as follows. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who with the torchlight of knowledge has opened my eyes, which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance. Although one may struggle for existence in this material world, to live forever is impossible. One must understand, however, that this struggle for existence is due to ignorance, for otherwise every living being is an eternal part of the Supreme Lord. There's no need to live as an elephant or man, American or Indian. One should desire only to achieve liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Because of ignorance, we consider every life offered by nature to be happy and pleasing. But in the degraded life within this material world, from the life of Lord Brahma down to that of an ant, no one can actually be happy. We are making so many plans to live happily, but there cannot be any happiness in this material world. However, we may try to make a permanent settlement in this life or that. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, in looking at this prayer of Gajendra's, I find myself jumping to the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada comes to, and that is that he says, because of ignorance, we consider any life offered by nature to be happy and pleasing, But in the degraded life within this material world, from the life of Lord Brahma down to that of an ant, no one can actually be happy. So it's quite a strong conclusion, and if we consider that any body form can be the body form of a person or that of an animal, with its innate tendencies, its dispositions, its particular acceptable behavior or unacceptable behavior, we consider any of those forms to be pleasant. So this particular view of the body as something that's gratifying or pleasing is obviously from the perspective of the occupant of the body. Now, a graphic example came to mind. Now, a skunk, for instance, and I bring up a skunk because there happens to be a family residing right where I live, somewhere burrowed into the earth. So now a skunk, for instance, is considered to produce a very foul smell. But the skunk itself and its offspring, whom I've seen, a mother with like 5 small skunk, they're all producing that particular odor. And no doubt to them, it's perfectly pleasing. So now the reason that an entity has this kind of consideration towards its place of residence is that there isn't the understanding that the pleasure should be taken rather in the self or the Atma. So in this particular prayer of Lord Gajendra's, these are his words, he's praying, "I simply desire liberation from the covering of ignorance." Now, there's many causes for one's sense satisfaction, or that which one finds agreeable. And in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th chapter, the 10th verse, actually those things that one finds pleasing to one's senses are broken down into 3 categories. So the first category is material enjoyment. The second category is mystic power, and the third category is liberation. Now, if we look at why each category is considered enjoyable, if we look at material enjoyment first, this means that material is all the things that occupy space. So those objects that occupy space are giving some sort of corporal satisfaction, and that category of enjoyment, Srila Prabhupada has used the word that those material objects that are providing the enjoyment, they actually are innumerable. And those who believe in materialism, there's the desire to increase the number of those material objects more and more. So I found myself observing this, that so many items that are in the marketplace, it has written on it made in China, whether it's clothing, electronics, plastic toys, whatever it is. And so I'm beginning to think that in some sense, the whole of China is working very hard to meet the demands for corporal satisfaction on the part of America. Because if you travel to another country, you don't see this plethora of material objects. So it's very specific to this country. I mean, it's really innumerable. Now, the soul that has that covering has this taste for material objects, and that taste comes from a way of being that's more passionate or ignorant. And those desires, because they're fueled by way of being that's passionate or ignorant, they are really unlimited. And the reason there's no limit to those desires is because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is not in the picture. So there's forgetting the existence of Krishna. So now going to the category of mystic power, and how this is related to the idea of some corporal sensual enjoyment. And when we read about mystic power, the enjoyment is on a more subtle plane. So there are 8 of them. So these are them. The enjoyment is being able to become the minutest of forms. So this is a form of enjoyment, to be able to shrink down. To become weightless is a form of enjoyment, because obviously, if one's corporal, there's weight. One just has to step on a scale. But the enjoyment lies in having the ability to become weightless. So, of course, one can't advertise, search after mystic power and you will no longer have to worry about your excess pounds. But anyway, to have another mystic power is to be able to have anything one desires. So now it sounds similar to the materialist view of material objects, but remember, this is on a subtle plane. So on a subtle plane, whatever one thinks of, one can acquire. So that's a form of enjoyment. And then to be able to lord it over material nature. So this sounds very similar, of course, to the material view of enjoyment, because there is intrinsic to the acquisition of objects or the creation of material objects is the exploitation of the resources of the earth. So it's intrinsic that there's a whole mood of lording it over material nature. I mean, I read a very interesting thing once, where I took birth, there's a landscape that's filled with the remnant dust from gold mines. So the entire city has a panoramic view of these, looks like mountains, but a little odd shaped. But each of them is just dust that remains from having mined deep into the earth. And the thing that I found interesting once was looking at the amount of earth that has to be dislodged to get 1 ounce of gold is apparently as high as some structure in New York, let's say the defunct World Trade Center. So this huge equivalent of a huge skyscraper worth of earth has to be dislodged in order to get 1 ounce of gold. So lording it over material nature, if one holds the materialistic view, is certainly a very almost bizarre extent of labor involved to be able to fulfill that desire to have the enjoyment in a corporal sense. Now, the last one of mystic power, which is very interesting, I hadn't come across this before. And this is considered a form of enjoyment. To throw earthly globes into outer space. So I'm not sure. I guess it's something like being playful on a mystic level. I don't know, a mystic power. I mean, on a material level, certainly it's the projecting the spaceship or the rocket into outer space. But, mystic power, you can actually do that on a subtle level, actually hurl an earthly globe into space. Form of enjoyment. And of course, mystic ability. And then the final category is that of liberation. Now, this particular category, it can be defined as, the enjoyment as such is that one's putting a halt to everything that's previously been described. The materialism, the mystic power, one puts a halt because one is halting the possibility of taking on another form. So you won't be repeating the existence in a corporal form. So that's liberation, and it's also absolving any of the remnant actions or reactions that come from having had the corporal body form. So these are considered three categories actually of enjoyment. So now, going back to the opposite end, so to speak, or the real core of happiness, is that of trying to satisfy the self, so actually going beyond even the category of liberation or moksha. So, because liberation in itself rests on a particular assumption, and that assumption is that religiousness or some acknowledgement of God is for the purpose of enhancing corporal enjoyment. So that means that even with the acknowledgement of God, it's for the purpose of developing economically or for satisfying those material necessities, even in excess, and ultimately gaining liberation. So one can understand that this is kind of a very neutral view in some sense of liberation. It's, just drawing something to a close. So very different from actually turning attention to the self. And in this particular verse, Srila Prabhupada says that one's desire to achieve liberation from birth and death should be such that actually there's no need to live in any particular body, be it that of an elephant or an American, or even of a skunk for that matter. So it's interesting to look at how Krishna views persons who are looking at liberation or wanting liberation, and this is how he expresses it. If a devotee wants material sense gratification or liberation from the Lord, Krishna immediately delivers it, but pure devotional service he keeps hidden. Actually, it wasn't Krishna talking, but it's from the Adi Leela. In the 8th chapter, 18th text. So it's something very special and private, and Krishna doesn't actually reveal devotional service. He keeps it hidden. So it means that Krishna will actually even deliver that kind of enhanced corporal enjoyment that persons may be asking for. And he'll even allow for liberation from repeated birth and death. He'll bring the cycle to a close. He'll grant it. But if we want to make a distinction between liberation and bhakti yoga or devotional service, then there's this fantastic statement that's made by Sukadev Goswami. So he quotes a particular verse, and it's actually Narada talking to Maharaj Yudhisthira. So this is to make that distinction between liberation and bhakti yoga. My dear Maharaj Yudhisthira, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is always ready to help you. He's your master, guru, God, very dear friend, and head of your family. Yet sometimes he agrees to act as your servant or order carrier. You are greatly fortunate because this relationship is only possible by bhakti yoga. The Lord can give liberation, mukti, very easily, but he does not give one bhakti yoga because by that process he's bound to the devotee. So rather fantastic. What one comes to understand is that turning of attention to the happiness of that's to be found in the Atma or the Self, and therefore establishing that relationship with Lord Krishna through bhakti yoga or performing service to him, means that there's a relationship that's established between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the devotee. And this relationship actually rests on a different kind of enjoyment. It's called transcendental mellows. So those transcendental mellows are in a relationship, viewing oneself in a certain role in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So similar to in material roles, one may view oneself in a particular way. For instance, one may view oneself as a child of a parent, or one may view oneself as a parent of a child. So those particular transcendental mellows are Dasya, Sakya, Vasalya, and Madhurya. So liberation is not very important to a devotee because of the fact that he's inclined to serve Krishna. And in one of these transcendental relationships, there's a natural inclination. Now, one can ask the question, what bridges that gap to reach that awareness of the relationship with Krishna? And Krishna explains it this way to Uddhava. He says, "O Uddhava, the living entity called Jiva is part and parcel of me, but due to ignorance, he has been suffering in material bondage since time immemorial. By knowledge, however, he can be liberated." This is how Krishna says that gap to turn the attention to the self can take place. And that's from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th canto in the 11th chapter, 4th verse. So this is the same point that Srila Prabhupada's making here. He's saying that, and these are his words, in the material world, every living entity is covered by the darkness of ignorance. So that darkness or that ignorance is a way of being, and it's common to every living entity residing here in the material world. So it means that one can't understand what is what. And because one doesn't have that proper capacity to make distinctions, it means that the moral character starts to get corrupted. And this is blatantly visible if one, looks around, broken families and abused children, nations using children in fighting, all sorts of moral corruption. So now this is the opposite of being in goodness, because in goodness there's the development of knowledge, and by that development of knowledge one can make proper distinctions. What's the appropriate course of action, what isn't. So the example that Srila Prabhupada uses for understanding the implication that happens just with the development of knowledge. He says, now, one may observe that a family member dies, and the implication naturally is man is mortal, and mortality is a certain fact. I mean, that's the implication. But the dementia that actually exists, and this is this covering of ignorance, is that there's this dedication to working for enhancing corporal enjoyment. I mean, there's complete dedication. So, and because of that, there's also the failure to develop spiritual understanding. So it's a dementia because the fact is there and it's not being attended to, the mortality of man. So it means that there has to be attention given to the eternal spirit. So there's a consequence for this, and Lord Krishna describes it. I'm going to read the Sanskrit and then give the translation. It's all on this topic of this ignorance and, continuing with the dementia. Tamas nyagnyayam vidhi mahanam sarva dehinam pramadalasya nidravas tan nipadhanati bharata. O scion of Bharata, know that the mode of darkness born of ignorance is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. So that's the consequence, the bondage. One becomes more and more enmeshed in everything related to those categories of material enjoyment. And Gajendra reveals in his prayer that he isn't identifying his self with the external body. It becomes very clear from his statement. What does he say? What's the use of an elephant's body covered externally and internally by ignorance? So we can understand by virtue of the fact that he has this understanding, he is liberated. There's an end point to that taking on of body. So we can understand he's not going to be taking on another corporal body. So one interesting thing he adds is that this covering isn't destroyed by the influence of time. So I found a very interesting way that the same idea is echoed. Krishna's talking to Uddhava, so he puts it this way. O Uddhava, both knowledge and ignorance are products of Maya and are expansions of my potency. Both knowledge and ignorance are beginningless and perpetually award liberation and bondage to embodied living beings. So this means that by expanding knowledge, if the soul is conditioned, he's liberated from illusion or delusion, as Krishna said was the consequence. And in the ultimate sense, that's what takes place. He's liberated from that delusion. And by ignorance expanding, the conditioned soul, or that soul that hasn't turned towards the Atma, hasn't taken to Bhakti Yoga, that soul remains unaware of that existence of Lord Krishna. And that soul is then driven further and further into being bound up by material nature or material existence, which in itself has actually got no essential reality. And this is this fantastic prayer by Gajendra's, and as I was able to understand it. So if there's some thoughts to assist with furthering the discussion, please go ahead.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'm wondering how Gajendra spoke these prayers in the form of an elephant. Was it internally or was it?
Well, because all the prayers are to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, and Gajendra is also mentioned earlier on, he understands the existence of Krishna within the heart. I would say it's safe to say he's talking internally. Yeah. I mean, generally, the body puts limitations on how one can utilize the senses, but the body is not limited in terms of the capacity of the soul. I mean, the capacity of the soul to actually connect with Krishna is there. The elephant body is endowed with memory. That's what elephants have as an unusual endowment in that particular body. So his memory, because that's mind, the impressions from the previous life have traveled with him. So in his memory, he's recalling that connection with Krishna through the body of a king that he had in his previous life. So thanks to that memory, whatever prayers he recited, and going through that great struggle, some understanding, spiritual understanding, intelligence has developed. So spiritual intelligence, transcendental intelligence, is the intelligence of the soul. So hence anything that's said is the soul communicating. So that's how I understand it.
One thing that you can also say, no doubt is an internal mood. The prayers were recorded, and also we can see that the crocodile also was qualified to be touched by Lord Vishnu and also receive that liberation. And one can say that because it was recorded, it also was an expression that was externally done like that. And crocodile is listening to it too. So he was associating in one sense with Gajendra and also becoming qualified to be in touch by Lord Vishnu. So that's also an understanding that I had. So that's a comment to add to your, that response. And one thing that it sort of I appreciated in the verse is that at this point of Gajendra's prayers, he is not worried even about getting the crocodile, getting safe, because the initial impetus was, I need to get safe from this dangerous position, and then he came to the conclusion that on his own strength he can, so he prayed to the Lord to free him. But as these prayers and this focus on meditation is going deeper and deeper, now he says, I don't even worry about being free from it. I just want to be all together, just finish with all this material existence. I don't want to get back, get free from this dangerous position and be able to establish myself back into the position that he had. So now he wants to be free. So it's quite remarkable that he comes to that stage of you mentioned in your class.
Yeah, thank you very much. The second thought of Gajendra having transitioned from initially the concern of the difficult situation to one of no longer even caring to just merely end the physical, corporal suffering, but rather that his attention has gone to purely wanting to be, have that connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's left behind that material enjoyment, even the liberation he's asking for. One knows that he's already more in the devotional space. He's not in just, okay, I've got through the material enjoyment, let me end. He's actually in the devotional space. So it is rather extraordinary. And the devotion just gets more and more pronounced, and his realizations through each prayer.
So I had a question about the soul. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you have an elephant's body, right? Because that's like material, right? With the elephant's body. How does the soul, because I was having a conversation yesterday. Does a soul, let me start over. God, we're made in His image, right? So our soul, how does our soul look like? Does it have 2 arms and 2 legs also and a head?
Okay. Well, I mean, the soul as it exists in the present body, and that includes Gajendra's body, is described as being 1/10,000 the size of a tip of a hair. And the composition, the elements by which it's made, the ingredients, are knowledge, bliss, and eternality. So now this sounds very obtuse in one sense, you know, how do you give it form? But then it's described that alongside the soul in the particular body, be it in the human body, the elephant body, the size of the tip of the thumb is residing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here we've got 1/10,000 the size of a tip of a hair next to the top of a thumb, but Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we know what his form looks like. It's depicted. So your question is like wondering what sort of, is there some form to the soul? So, you know, the best I can answer this is because the indication is that one is making the connection with Krishna through a transcendental mallow. So there's a relationship. That transcendental mallow, I guess, evolves in a form because there's all the thinking and the feelings in that relationship that on a subtle plane must create a certain form, but I can't answer more than that. Maybe Subal can help.
One thing is that there's an eternal form that we have. So it's not that it becomes created, but it becomes awakened. The other thing is that to try to understand the spiritual form from the space or the experience of form that we have is always a mistake. To try to understand the spiritual reality from the perspective of the material reality that we have. So it's not the same, because we have the case of Srimati Tulsi Maharani. That's an eternal form in the spiritual world, the form of a Tulsi plant. But she also have a form of a female form. And so, you know, we can like, okay, so is this one or is that one? Is beyond our experience. But one thing is that the forms that we experience here are a perverted reflection. They come from the spiritual world. In terms of our form, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's forms of the devotees in Vaikuntha that is Sarupya, means that you have a form just like Lord Vishnu, 4-armed, but there's the forms of the cowherd boys, there's the form of the cowherd girls, form of cows. These are our eternal forms. There's the forms of the elephants, there's the forms of even a dog, parrots, monkeys, turtles, desire trees, These are our eternal forms. So and they also can manifest, it's a complete different reality. It's beyond our comprehension.
But certainly it rests on the particular transcendental mellow of the relationship.
Hare Krishna. I would like to ask a question in a bit of a challenging mood, okay? So Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita gives 4 reasons why people come to Krishna consciousness, like relief from distress, like material distress, and seeking after knowledge or wealth and things like this. And though many stories in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's very much this emphasis, some stories I can at least say, there's this emphasis on relief from material distress. And then also, there's Queen Kunti who's asking for material distress to remind her of the Lord. Though, I guess the challenge I'd like to pose is actually we're all looking for relief from our anarthas, actually. And even we'll find people outside Krishna consciousness, like there's very many personalities. So you have Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra, like these spiritualists, and their literature is very much addressing anarthas. And is trying to take people consciously, I guess, through some kind of anartha nivritti, though it's being done outside the association of devotees, so, of course, it's not so effective. But here we have Gajendra, and he's starting from basically material distress. And through these prayers, in a very short time, I'm not seeing any anartha nivritti. And Gajendra is very much afflicted by sense gratification, pleasure. He's completely in illusion. Where's his anarthas? That's my kind of challenging mood question.
Well, the question of somebody who was exhibiting all signs of material enjoyment, of being caught up in corporal enjoyment, such as Gajendra, then to have be showing this, I guess, devotion to Lord Krishna, it seems that there's a gap from the one point to the other point, because there's a middle component of anarthas, which implies obstacles to being able to act in devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you're noticing that, you're not seeing that a single obstacle has been expressed there. So Gajendra is obviously very highly elevated. Just every prayer reveals that he actually has a very advanced transcendental understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even this prayer, basically that, that distinction between liberation and devotional service, it's also magnifying the fact that he's in a space of devotional service. So he's asking for liberation as though he's in that old position, the position of being just looking for the corporal enjoyment with his family members, the setting he's in. It would seem that he's viewing himself that way still, because he's saying, liberate me from this elephant body. In fact, I don't even want to live after I get to leave this body. So just, allow me to be liberated. But the liberation, it's revealing his devotional space. The liberation he's asking for is liberation from ignorance. So it takes a transcendentalist to understand that the liberation is not just from the gross body form or even the subtle body, but it's actually liberation from ignorance, that covering, that delusion that's making one cut off from Krishna. So the depth of his prayer is so great, and it reveals that he's past any step-by-step cleansing process of the heart to get a better understanding of his relationship with Krishna. Gajendra has got that understanding. He's praying that never let me always be free from that covering of ignorance. And to have that understanding means he's already cleared, that ignorance has been cleared, because that's what anarthas are. It's slowly clearing the ignorance, that cloud. So the cloud for Gajendra has been cleared just by the depth of realization that's coming through in what he's expressing. So that's what I'm understanding. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Oh, Sivan.
He has that depth because he was in his previous life, he was that advanced as Maharaj Indradumya. So that's the part that,
Yeah, the soul carries the extent of its devotion. It doesn't, you don't start from the beginning again. Like, what's that expression? Where you've come up to, it continues in that relationship. So, elephant body or not, he continued. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.